In the shadows of antiquity, among the forgotten echoes of history, rises an enigmatic figure, Asclepius, the living legacy of Hermes Trismegistus. His story intertwines with the golden threads of ancient knowledge and the secrets of the universe. From the sands of Egypt to the mystical temples of Greece, Asclepius embodies the fusion of the divine and the human, of science and spirituality. In this text, immerse yourself in the lost passages of his life and teachings. Discover how this wise healer not only cured bodies but also souls, pushing the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural. Through astonishing tales and enduring lessons, Hermes Trismegistus unveils the true power of divine thought and the magic of universal love. Prepare to embark on an unforgettable journey into the hidden mysteries of Asclepius, where each word echoes from the past, resonating in the present, reminding us that wisdom is eternal and knowledge infinite. First part, the place of man in the cosmos. Introduction. Every human soul, Asclepius, is immortal, but they are not all of the same kind. Rather, they differ in character or time. Then, Trismegistus, not all souls have the same quality. Ah, I see that you have soon abandoned the true prudence of reason. Have I not already explained that everything is one, and that one is everything, since everything already exists in the Creator before it has been produced? And with what reason is the Creator called everything, given that all things are his members? Try not to forget throughout this discussion that he alone is everything, or he himself is the creator of the whole cosmos, unity and totality. Everything that comes to the earth, water or air proceeds from the heaven of fire. Only the part that ascends is life-giving, while the part that descends serves the first. In general, everything that descends from above is generative, while what emanates from below nourishes. The earth, unique in remaining stable in its own place, is the receiver of all things of every kind, and returns everything it receives. In this consists the All, which agrees and possesses all things and is all things. Soul and matter are set in motion by nature, which imprisons them, and from this results the multifaceted diversity of everything that appears. However, although we recognize an infinite number of distinct species, they are indeed linked in a unity, to the effect that it seems that everything is one, and that everything has been born from it. There are therefore 14 elements with which matter has been shaped: fire, water, earth, and air. A single matter, a single soul, and a single God. Continuity, hierarchy, and communication among beings. Now, try to focus entirely on my words with all the strength of your mind, and all the subtlety you are capable of, because truly, the doctrine of divinity, apart from being understood only with an effort of reason under divine inspiration, resembles a powerful river that, flowing violently, rushes from the heights, so that if we are not alert, it quickly and swiftly surpasses the attention of the listener as well as that of the speaker. Heaven, God perceptible to the senses, is the governor of all bodies that grow and decrease under the influence of the sun and the moon. In turn, heaven, along with its own soul, and all beings within it, are governed by God, their Creator. From all these beings ruled by God emanates an abundant flow that penetrates through the souls of all kinds and all singular types among the nature of things. For its part, matter has been arranged by God as the receptacle of all kinds of forms, and is modeled into forms through the 4 elements by nature, which extends the set of beings to heaven so that they may be pleasing to the eyes of God. Furthermore, all beings that depend on the above are distributed in forms. All singular types of beings follow their forms, so that the genus is the whole and the type is part of the genus. Thus, the genus of gods, for example, exteriorizes the types of gods in the same way that it generates types similar to itself. The genus of demons, the genus of men, the genus of birds, or the genus of any beings in the world. There is another genus of living being, however, a genus without a soul but not lacking a certain sensitivity that makes it delight in what benefits it and weaken and die with what harms it. I refer to all those beings that feed from the earth through roots and stems in good condition and whose types abound throughout the earth. Heaven, for its part, is full of God, and the aforementioned genera extend their residence to these places, Genera whose types are, in any case, immortal, because if the type is a part of the genus, for example, a man of humanity, inasmuch as it must follow the quality of its genus, then, although all genera are immortal, not all singular types are. However, in the case of the divine, both genus and singular type are immortal. As for the remaining classes, immortality belongs to the genus, for although singular types die, the genus is perpetuated through the succession of births, so that the type is mortal and the genus is not. For example, a man is mortal, humanity immortal. Now the types of each genus interrelate with all the other genera, whether the types have been made initially or have been born from those that have been made, because the types are born by the work of gods, demons, or men, and are similar to their respective genera. Without divine mandate, it is impossible for bodies to be formed. Without the collaboration of demons, individuals cannot receive their form, and without human intervention, inanimate things cannot be constructed or attended to. An example of the first are those demons who by chance come from one genus to another and enter into relation with some type of the divine genus. They are considered, due to this proximity and interaction, as similar to the gods. On the other hand, those demons who persevere in the quality of their genus are called philanthropic demons. Similar considerations could be made about humans, although in a broader sense, because the types of the human genus are multiform and enormously varied. Indeed, even though man proceeds from above, where he has community with the aforementioned species, he establishes numerous relations with all other species, and most of them by necessity. In this sense, some men endowed with divine thought manage to approach and connect with the gods through divine piety. Other men, by uniting with demons, enter into relations with them. Others, satisfied with the median age of their genus, remain only men. And the remaining types of men, finally, assimilate to the genera with whose types they have relations. Man. The place of man in the cosmos. Intermediary role. Man is therefore a great miracle, a living being worthy of veneration and honor, a being that changes to the nature of a god as if he truly were one, a being that understands himself through the genus of demons, knowing that his nature is congenial to theirs, a being that despises his mere human nature component, fixed on the divine character of his other part. Oh, how blessed is the composite nature of man! He is linked to the gods in consanguineous divinity, while despising the part of himself that makes him earthly. He is united with the bond of love to all other beings, to whom he knows he is connected by divine disposition. He lifts his eyes to heaven, giving his privileged intermediary place to both the beings that are inferior to him and being loved by those who surpass him. He cultivates the earth, mingles with the elements thanks to the agility of his mind, and descends to the depths with the penetration of his spirit. Everything is permitted to him, not even the sky seems distant, because he measures it closely thanks to his ingenuity. No darkness of the air overshadows the application of his mind, nor does the density of the earth hinder his sight, nor does the unfathomable depth of the waters obstruct his gaze. He is, at the same time, all things, and is everywhere. Divine character, the nous. Regarding the genera of living beings, there are those animated ones that are provided with roots that go from top to bottom, while the inanimate ones form their stems through a root that acts from above. On the other hand, there are beings that nourish themselves with two kinds of food, while others with only one kind, for there are two types of nourishment, that of the soul and that of the body, which are the parts that constitute living beings. The soul is nourished by the permanent movement of the sky. The body develops thanks to water and earth, both foods of the lower world, and the vital breath that reaches the whole universe mingles with all beings and vivifies them. Man, for his part, adds thought to reason, the fifth part that has been granted only to man, and the only one that proceeds from the ether. For among all living beings, only man is adorned with thought, which raises and exalts him to the knowledge of the divine plan. We have now reached the subject of thought, but you will allow me to defer its explanation, because this is a very high and holy doctrine, in no way inferior to that which deals with divinity itself. Here we see, therefore, what we have begun to discuss at the beginning concerning the union with the gods, which only men enjoy, and by divine consideration, those men who have achieved the immense happiness of being the repositories of the divine faculty of thinking, of the most divine thought that exists only in God and in human understanding. Then, Trismegistus, thought is not uniformly given to all men. Indeed, Asclepius, because not all men attain true knowledge, but some, driven by rashness without adhering to any true reason, are deceived by a phantom born of the wickedness of their minds. In this way, an excellent living being degenerates into the nature of a beast and the habits of an animal. But I have already told you that I will speak in depth about the subject of thought, and all that refers to it when discussing the vital breath. The dual nature of man, structure. Man is the only living being of dual nature. One of his parts is simple. The Greeks call it essential, and we call it form, divine, in likeness. The other part is quadruple. The Greeks call it material, and others call it mundane. And from it the body has been made, a body that envelops the part we have called divine, so that, thus covered and protected by the wall of the body, the divinity of the pure mind can remain in itself with its peers, that is, with the senses of the pure mind. But Trismegistus, what made it necessary for man to come into this world? Why could he not remain in that place where he is God, enjoying the utmost happiness? A well-formulated question, Asclepius, and I pray to God that I may answer it adequately, because your question refers to the supreme whole, and if everything depends on the will of God, this does so to an even greater extent. Listen, Asclepius, the Lord and Maker of all things whom we rightly call God, created from himself a second God, visible and sensible. That it is sensible does not mean that it feels. Whether it feels or not is something we will discuss at another time, but that it can be seen by sight. When he created this God, the firstborn of him and the second after him, he found him beautiful, as he was completely filled with the goodness of all things, and he loved him as a son in his divinity, but as a God in his greatness and goodness. Wishing that there should be another being who could behold the beauty of this God born of himself, he then created man. The will of God implies total realization, that is, willing and realizing are fulfilled at the same time. This man, who was to resemble God in his reason and care of everything, was created by God as essential only, realizing that this man could not take care of all things unless he was covered with a material covering. He housed him in a bodily shelter and ordered that all men should have these characteristics, mixing and uniting portions of both natures into a single being in a sufficient measure. Thus, man was constituted of soul and body, of eternal and mortal nature, so that he could correspond to the dual origin of his parts, that is, to admire and worship heavenly things while inhabiting and governing earthly ones. The double task of man, to order the earthly and attend to worship. When I speak here of the mortal, I do not refer to water and earth, which of the four are the elements that nature subordinated to men, but to everything that men do on these elements or from them, that is, the cultivation of the land, pastures, constructions, ports, navigations, communications, and mutual exchanges. All that constitutes the firmest bond among men themselves, and that part of the cosmos made of water and earth. A terrestrial part of the cosmos that is preserved thanks to the knowledge and practice of the arts and sciences, without which God did not wish the world to reach its perfection. For what God decides is necessarily fulfilled. His will implies realization, and it is inconceivable that he could be displeased with the result if he already knew long in advance what would result, and that it would please him. But I have already noticed that you are anxious to hear how man can have love and care for heaven and its inhabitants. Listen, the love for the God of heaven and celestial beings consists solely in frequent acts of worship that only man and no other divine or mortal being can perform. Heaven and the celestial beings delight in these acts of admiration, piety, praise, and deference by men. That is why the supreme God sent the chorus of the muses among men, for without them the terrestrial cosmos would have seemed too coarse, and men would not have been able to use the songs inspired by them to better celebrate with praises the one who is the Son and Father of all things. In this way, sweet harmony would never be lacking on earth due to celestial praises. On the other hand, some very few men, endowed with a pure mind, have been graced with the venerable function of raising their eyes to heaven. However, all those who, by the constitution of their dual nature, stop at a lower degree of intelligence, weighed down by the bodily mass, are all tasked with the care of the elements and even of the lower ones. Man, then, is a partially mortal living being, whose mortality does not seem to diminish him in any way. On the contrary, it appears to have strengthened him to make him much more apt and effective in his composite character to fulfill a specific plan. Indeed, if he were not constituted of both substances, he could not account for his dual task, to attend to the care of the earthly and to love the divinity. Now, Asclepius, I want you to pay close attention to the maxim I am about to present, and to apply yourself with all your perspicacity and a well-awakened mind. This is a doctrine incredible to most, and should be received whole and true by the most sacred minds. Well, let's begin. God, the Lord of eternity, is the first, the cosmos is the second, and man is the third. God is the creator of the cosmos and of all beings in it, and governs all things together with man, who is the governor of what is ordered. If man diligently assumes his task, that is, if he diligently attends to the care of the world, both he and the world become an ornament to each other. In fact, it seems that man is called world, or more correctly cosmos in Greek, because of his divine coordination. Man knows himself and knows the world, and thanks to this, he can remember what suits his parts and what things he can use. He can recognize whom he should serve, and to whom he should offer supreme praise and thanksgiving. He should venerate his image, and not ignore that he too is a second image of God. For there are two images of him, the cosmos and man. This is the reason man is a unique assembly of two parts. One of them is composed of superior elements, intelligence and thought, spirit and reason, by which he is divine and seems capable of ascending to heaven. The other part is material, composed of fire, earth, water, and air, by which he is mortal and remains on earth, so that he does not abandon all things entrusted to his care uncovered and unprotected. Therefore, the divine part of human nature was created mortal at the same time by placing it in a body. The salvation, piety, and measure of man, this dual being, are primarily summarized in piety, which is the origin of goodness. Perfect piety can only exist if the virtue of disdain has fortified it against all desire for foreign things. For foreign to everything that connects us with the gods are the things of this earth that are possessed by a desire of the body and are called possessions, because they are not born with us, but are possessed later, giving us the sense of the word possessions. All such things, including the body, are foreign to man, so that we may despise all that we desire and the place from which the vice of desire comes, for it is fitting and rational for me to conclude that man can only be such to the extent that through the contemplation of the divinity he despises and disdains his mortal part, which has been incorporated into him because of his function of caring for the lower world. Note in this sense that for man to be perfectly finished in each of his parts, he was endowed with 4 elements in each of them. On one side, the 2 hands and the 2 feet, which he uses along with the other members of the body to serve the lower, that is, the earthly world. On the other side, the spirit, thought, memory, and prudence, the 4 faculties that allow him to know and contemplate divine things. As a result, his investigation of the differences between things, their qualities, activities, magnitudes, only leads to knowledge based on conjectures, as he is hindered by the mass and imperfection of the body and cannot penetrate them. Therefore, in the true causes of the nature of things, whether immortality or transmigration, it is there. For this man, thus produced and formed, entrusted by God, with such great service and such veneration, that is competent in his work of preserving the world, and pious in reverence to God, obedient with dignity and as necessary to the divine will, what do you think is the reward he deserves? For truly, one who serves diligently and enhances the beauty of the world, which is the work of God, cooperates with the divine will. With the sustenance of his body, and in his daily work and care, he brings order and beauty that God modeled by his own will. How were our ancestors rewarded? What reward do we also aspire to, trusting and making vows, if it pleases the divine will? Is the reward not this, that when we have completed the time of our service, freed from the guardianship of the world and the bonds of mortality, we are restored pure and holy to the condition of our superior part, our divine part? Just and true is what you say, Trismegistus, for this is the reward that awaits those who live in piety towards God and attend to the world with diligence. But those who do not, and live impiously, will see their return to heaven delayed and will begin an ignominious migration, unworthy of a Holy Spirit, incarnated in bodies. As I understand more from your discourse, Trismegistus, I realize that souls in this life are in grave danger concerning their hopes of future immortality. Evidently, to some, immortality seems incredible, to others, a tale, and to others, even something worthy of ridicule. For in this bodily life, the delight obtained from possessions is so sweet that it twists the soul by the neck and binds man to that part of him by which he is mortal, while the wickedness envious of immortality does not allow him to recognize his divine part. Philosophy, the knowledge of salvation. Furthermore, I prophesy to you that after us there will no longer be any pure love for philosophy, which consists solely in the effort to know God through frequent contemplation and holy piety. In fact, there are already many among us who confuse it with all kinds of speculations. How can they make philosophy incomprehensible or confuse it with speculations? For in this way, the slyness mixes philosophy with incomprehensible disciplines such as arithmetic, music, and geometry. However, pure philosophy, which only attends to piety towards God, should only concern itself with other sciences, to the extent that through them we marvel at how the return of the stars to their initial positions, their predetermined seasons, and all their changes are regulated by number, and that by knowing the dimensions, qualities, and quantities of the earth, the depths of the sea, the power of fire, and the activities of nature in all of these, man is led by admiration to worship and praise the art and wisdom of God. Therefore, the knowledge of music is only to understand the orderly distribution of the whole universe and the divine plan by which each thing was assigned a place. For the arrangement that in an artistic plan gathers singular things into a single whole completes a very sweet and true concert that produces divine order. The men who will come after us, deceived by the cunning of the sophists, will stray from the true, pure, and holy philosophy, the philosophy untainted by any mass, the curiosity of spirit that consists solely in honoring God with simple minds and souls, revering his works, and giving thanks to the divine will, the only one completely full of goodness. And with this, I conclude this treatise. Let's now move on to the topic of the vital breath and analogous issues. Second part, nature and kind of gods. Worship and the first principles of the cosmos. God. In the beginning there existed God and matter in Greek. The vital breath accompanied matter, or rather, was in matter, but not in the same way that it was in God, the same breath and the original principles of the cosmos. For although these things did not exist, in fact, since they had not yet been generated, they existed at least in what was to generate them. For not generated refers both to things that have not yet been born and to those that lack the capacity to generate, that is, those from which nothing can come into being. On the contrary, any being that naturally possesses the capacity to generate is capable of actually doing so. That is, it can give rise to something else, including the case of having been born from itself. It is certain that one who generates itself can easily generate others from whom all things are born. Consequently, the eternal God, cannot and could not be generated. He is what he is, what he was, and what he will always be. Such is the nature of God, which proceeds entirely from itself. Matter and the problem of evil. On the other hand, material nature and the vital breath, although they appear as ungenerated from the beginning, possess in themselves both the power to be born and the possibility to create. Indeed, the principle of fecundity is a quality of matter, for it possesses in itself the power and natural capacity to conceive and give birth, so that it is capable of generating by itself, without external intervention, in conception. On the contrary, those beings that need union with the other sex to conceive must necessarily be separated. Thus, this space that contains the cosmos, including all the beings within it, this space, I say, must necessarily be generated and possess within itself the capacity of both sexes. I call space the place where all things are, for they could not exist without the place that contains them. Nothing would exist if it did not have a reserved place in space, nor could the qualities, quantities, positions, and activities of things be discerned if they were not in any place. Therefore, the capacity of matter lies in the fact that, even though it is ungenerated, it contains within itself the ability to generate all things, offering a fertile womb for their conception. In short, all the actuality of matter is summed up in being able to generate even without having been generated. But if its own quality is to give birth, it can also give birth to evil. Until this moment, Asclepius and Ammon, I have not referred to a question that many might formulate as follows: why does God not eliminate evil and remove it from the nature of things? This does not deserve any response. However, in consideration of you, I will proceed and explain this matter. Some say that God should have completely freed the world from evil, but on the contrary, it is also entwined in what seems like a part of him. In saying this, they do not consider that the Supreme God not only foresaw it in advance, but also took measures regarding it by providing the minds of men with thought, knowledge, and understanding. For with these faculties which make us superior to other living beings, we alone can avoid the deceptions, treachery, and vices of wickedness. He who is able to shun these things by their mere appearance before being involved in them can be said to be fortified by divine wisdom and prudence. For the foundation of any science lies in the supreme goodness of God. In the pneuma, the vital breath, all beings in the cosmos are supplied and vivified according to the orders of the Supreme God, to whom it obeys as its organ or instrument. But this is enough concerning this topic. The three principles of the God called Supreme, perceptible only to the intelligence, is the guide and governor of this sensible God, who encompasses within himself all places, all substances of things, all matter of what is born and reproduced, everything in sum regardless of its quality or dimension. Through the vital breath, all species in the cosmos are set in motion and directed according to the nature that God assigned to each. In the third place, matter is the receptacle of all beings, their changes and their multiplicity, and everything is governed by God, who assigns to each being what it needs and fills everything with the vital breath infused according to the nature of each one, both the material and the intelligible. The round cavity of the cosmos, by its quality and spherical form, is not fully visible, because if you hypothetically place yourself anywhere on its upper part and look downward, you cannot distinguish what is at the bottom. Therefore, some attribute to it dimensions and characteristics of space. But this partial visibility is nothing more than an illusion, for the sphere appears decorated by forms sculpted upon it as images of ideas, while in reality it is invisible from any point of view. Hence, if its bottom exists, it is called Ares of Jane in Greek, because the bottom of the sphere is also invisible. Ideas are also called forms to the extent that they are visible in Greek, because there is the invisible, and it is from the abyss, because it is at the bottom of the sidewalk. These are the fundamental and original principles of all things, for everything exists in them, through them, or starting from them. And all this, of which you speak, Trismegistus, is the substance of all species existing in the cosmos, and of each one in particular, so to speak, material. For matter nourishes bodies and breath nourishes souls. However, thought, that celestial gift enjoyed by men, not by all, but only by the few whose minds are prepared to receive such a great privilege, illuminates the human mind just as the sun illuminates the cosmos, and in a more enduring manner. For in the case of the sun, everything it illuminates loses its light when night comes, due to the interposition of the earth and the moon. Thought, on the other hand, once united with the human soul, forms with it a single substance, molded by a well-adjusted life, so that souls of this nature are never hindered by the errors of darkness. Therefore, it has been unjustly said that the soul of the gods is thought, although I would specify that this is true not of all gods, but only of the greatest and principal ones, intelligible gods, sensible gods, gods of names, principles of things, and foundations of the primordial. Great are the secrets that I am about to reveal to you. Therefore, before I begin, I pray to heaven to allow me to reveal to you these divine mysteries. There are many kinds of gods. Among them, some are intelligible and others sensible. Intelligible does not mean that they are inaccessible to our cognition. In fact, we know them better than the so-called sensible ones. My exposition will show this to you thoroughly, and if you pay attention, you will see it clearly. For this sublime doctrine, too divine not to easily surpass the efforts of the human mind, if you do not receive them with the utmost attention, trusting your ears to the words of the speaker, they will pass you by and continue on their course, or even more, flow back upon themselves and return to mix with the liquids of their source. First of all, there are the gods, princes of all species of gods. After them come the gods who have received a share of their essence. These are sensible, made in the likeness of their double origin, and they devote themselves to producing all things in the sensible world, one through the other, each illuminating its work. Jupiter is the ruler of the sky, whatever is designated by this name, for through him Jupiter dispenses life to all beings. Light, that arc of the sun, for the good of light, is diffused over us through the solar disk. The 36, those called the fixed stars in the same place, have light and arc. Or prince, the one called uniform or pantomorph, which through it provides diverse forms to the diverse types. The so-called 7 spheres have Borussia arcs, that is, princes of themselves, fortune, and destiny, through which all things diversified in perpetual motion change according to natural law and unalterable disposition. The organ or instrument of all these gods is the air, through which all things are made. Its arc is the second to immortal things, the mortal things already these, their equals. In this way, all things close to one another are intertwined with others in a correspondence that extends from the deepest to the highest. But mortal things are bound to immortal things, and sensible things to intelligible things. Moreover, the whole universe obeys the supreme ruler, the Lord, so that it is not many things, but only one. Indeed, all things hang and emanate from the one, for if considered separately, it gives the impression of being countless, but in its entirety, they are nothing but one thing, or rather two, that from which all things are made, and that which has made them, that is, the matter that constitutes them and the will of God, by whose command alone they are engendered in so many distinct forms. The supreme God, denomination and bisexuality, can you explain to me this doctrine, Trismegistus? Look, Asclepius, God the Father and Lord of all things, or whatever other more holy and pious denomination men may attribute to him. For if we attribute a name to understand ourselves among us, this obliges us to be sacred, although in consideration of such eminent divine majesty, no name can do him justice. For if the human word is this, a sound produced by the percussion of air with breath, and emitted with the purpose of expressing any intention or thought conceived in the mind from the senses, a name whose substance composed of few syllables will be entirely determined and circumscribed so as to enable necessary communication between the interlocutors, and if also the name of God is composed of sensation, breath, and air, and all that they bear, does it not produce more pure than hope can harbor from the Creator of all majesty, the Father, and Lord of all things? I may be called with a single name or a compound of many, so God, being both one and all, completely full of the power of both sexes, permanently pregnant with his own will, gives birth eternally to what he wants to create, for his will is goodness, a goodness that spreads among all things, born naturally of his divinity, so that all beings retain their current and past identity and provide future beings with the ability to reproduce. In this way, Asclepius, the doctrine about why and how all things are made, is transmitted to you. Excursus, the mystery of divine sex. Have I heard correctly, Trismegistus, that God is bisexual? Yes, and not only God, but all living and non-living beings, and there can be no infertile being, because if we deprive the beings that exist at this moment of their fertility, they could not preserve their identity in the future, because I said it is natural to feel and engender, and that the cosmos contains this nature and preserves all generated beings. Indeed, both sexes are filled with procreative force, and the conjunction of both, or rather their union properly called Cupid or Venus or both, is a mystery that we cannot comprehend. Keep this in your mind as something that truly surpasses current evidence. Now I want to emphasize something else. The Lord of all nature, God, has invented and assigned to all beings the mystery of eternal procreation, a mystery innate to them, encompassing affection, joy, happiness, desire, and divine love. I must underscore what power and necessity lie within this mystery. If one does not know it well enough, each of you can understand it by considering your innermost feelings. Consider that supreme moment reached through continuous friction, observing how each nature pours its seed into the other, and how eagerly they snatch it from one another and hide it within themselves. That moment when, following their common union, females appropriate the energy of males, and the latter tire in female eagerness. Indeed, the summit of this mystery, something so sweet and necessary, should be consummated in secrecy, so that the divinity of both natures is not ashamed of the sexual act. It becomes the subject of ridicule from ignorant masses, or worse, the scrutiny of impious men. Earthly gods, divine character of man, are not plentiful. Indeed, pious men are so few that they could be counted among all the people in the world. Conversely, wickedness abounds in the majority due to lack of wisdom and knowledge of reality. To reject and remedy all vice in the world, it is necessary to comprehend the divine plan that has designed all things. Thus, when ignorance and lack of knowledge persist unscathed, evil is restored and breaches the soul with incurable vices that infect and corrupt it. The sole complete remedy for this soul, swollen as if by poison, resides in science and knowledge, even if only for the few who possess it. It is worth continuing and completing this exposition on why divinity only made men participants in their understanding and knowledge. Pay attention, then. When God the Father and Lord created men after the gods, combining in equal measure the material and corruptible part with the divine, the vices of the material once joined to the bodies remained in them, along with those resulting from our need for food and sustenance common to other living beings. For through food, the appetites of desire settle in the human soul, along with all other vices. The gods, on the other hand, were fashioned from the purest part of matter and need no assistance from reason and science. Though immortality and the rigor of eternal youth make them akin to wisdom and science, God instituted for them as science and knowledge the order of necessity in the form of eternal law, so that they would not be estranged from them, and the unity of his plan would be maintained. At the same time, God distinguished man unique among living beings with the exclusive gift of reason and science, so that through them he could reject and expel bodily vices and strive towards the hope and will of immortality. In short, God modeled man with both natures, the divine and the mortal, for those who would be good and could attain immortality. Such a man, ordained by divine will, is superior both to gods, constituted solely of immortal nature, and to other mortals. Therefore man, united to the gods by bonds of kinship, venerates them with piety and sanctity, while they in turn care for and watch over everything concerning men with affectionate care. Naturally, I refer to those few men endowed with a pious mind. As for the perverted, indeed we should not even speak, lest this most holy discourse be advanced in their presence. Since the discourse itself has led us to speak of kinship and the community that binds men with the gods, now know, Asclepius, the power and strength of man, the man, artisan of gods, just as the Lord and Father to what is higher. God is the creator of the celestial gods. Likewise, man is the artisan of the gods who dwell in temples, pleased with human proximity, so that man not only is enlightened, but also enlightens, not only projects towards God, but also projects gods. Are you amazed, Cletio, or do you not believe it like most? Not I, Trismegistus, I am confused, but freely believe your words and consider that man, having attained such a wonderful destiny, must be completely happy. Indeed, more than I, man is truly worthy of admiration and more eminent than any other being, because if we refer to the race of the gods, it is evident, recognized by all, that they are constituted of the purest part of matter, and almost only manifest in the form of head, but not with the other members. However, the figures of the gods produced by man are modelled from both natures, the purest and entirely worthy of a god, that which man possesses, namely the matter with which they have been moulded. Moreover, these figures are not limited only to the head, but are modelled with the entire body, with all its members. Therefore, humanity, in remembrance of its nature and origin, perseveres in its thirst, imitating divinity. For just as the Father and Lord created the eternal gods to be similar to him, thus man fashions his gods in the likeness of his own facial features. You refer to statues, Trismegistus, to statues, Asclepius. Do you realize how difficult it is for you to believe too? Because these are animated statues, endowed with thought and filled with vital breath, capable of doing a great many things of all kinds. Statues that know beforehand the future, predict it through luck, divination, dreams, and many other methods, heal diseases in men, and inspire joy or sadness according to our merits, prophecy, death, and regeneration of the cosmos. Perhaps you are unaware that Egypt is the image of heaven, or more accurately, the projection and descent down here of all that is governed and set in motion in heaven. Indeed, if we are to tell the truth, our earth is the temple of the entire cosmos. But as it is fitting that prudent men know beforehand the future, it is not permissible for them to be ignorant of this. A time will come when it will seem that the Egyptians have been faithful in vain to divinity, that their piety, attentive devotion, and all their holy veneration will be revealed as ineffective and sterile. A time will come when the gods will hastily return from earth to heaven and leave Egypt, a country that was the seat of religious practices, deserted. It will be stripped of the gods and will never again enjoy their presence, for foreigners will ravage this country, showing contempt for religion and, what is more serious, prohibiting with alleged laws and under prescribed penalties all religious practices of emotion or worship to the gods. This sacred land, the seat of sanctuaries and temples, will then be covered with tombs and corpses. O Egypt, Egypt of your religion, only fables will survive, and these will be incredible to your descendants. The words recounting your pious deeds will only remain engraved in stones. Your land will be invaded by the Assyrian, the Indian, or any other barbarous neighbor. The gods will return to heaven, the forsaken men will die altogether, and then, O Egypt, deprived of gods and men, you will become a desert. To you, most holy river, I address myself, to you, and I announce future events. A flood of blood will reach your shores and overflow them, and not only your divine waters, but all will be profaned by blood and overflowed. The number of dead will far exceed that of the living, and the survivor will be recognized as Egyptian only by their language, because by their deeds they will appear different. Why do you weep, Asclepius? Egypt is destined to undergo something more serious and much worse than these things. Worse calamities will defile Egypt even more. In another time, holy and beloved by divinity, the sole foundation of the gods on earth by its master piety, holiness and devotion, will become a model of extreme impiety. Then the cosmos will no longer be something worthy of admiration or reverence for men who have despised all this good cosmos, which is nothing better than it can be imagined to have been, is now, or ever will be, in grave danger, and will become a burden difficult to bear for men who will disdain and come to hate the cosmos, this inimitable work of God, a glorious construction orderly, arranged by the multiple diversity of forms, instrument of divine will that dispenses without envy all gifts to its work, assembly one and diverse at the same time in a single whole of all that can be considered worthy of admiration, praise, and love. Men will prefer darkness to light and judge death more useful than life. No one will lift their eyes to the sky. The pious man will be considered insane, the impious wise, the madman furious will be considered brave, and the most evil man good. The soul and its doctrine, which is immortal by nature, or which is certainly believed to attain immortality, as I have taught you, will not only be laughed at, but will be considered a fantasy of pride. Whoever devotes himself to the religion of the mind, believe me, will be guilty of capital punishment. New rites and a new law will be instituted. Nothing holy, nothing pious, nor anything worthy of heaven and celestial beings will ever be heard or harbored again in the human mind. After the painful separation of gods from men, only evil angels will remain on earth, those who, united with men, violently push them to all kinds of wicked audacity, war, theft, deceit, and everything contrary to the nature of the soul. The earth will be destabilized, the sea will cease to be navigable, and the sky will be deprived of the course of the stars and the path of the stars. Divine voices will be forced into silence, the fruits of the earth will rot, barren it will become, and the very air will languish in sinister inaction. This will be the old age of the cosmos, impiety, disorder, and irrationality of all that is good. But when all this has been accomplished, Asclepius, then the Lord and Father God, maker of the first and only God, after noting these customs and voluntary behaviors, will by his will, which is divine goodness, put an end to vice in the corruption of all things, will abolish error and put an end to all evil, will deny evil with a flood, will consume it with fire, and will exterminate it with pestilential diseases scattered in different places. After that, he will restore the world to its ancient beauty until it seems worthy again of reverence and admiration, and the men of this new world will once again praise goodbye to the producer and restorer of such a great work, with frequent hymns of praise and blessing. A regeneration of the world that will mean the renewal of all good things, the restoration in holiness and piety of nature itself, imposed on the course of time by the divine will, which is and was without beginning and eternal, and which remains identical to itself throughout eternity, because the intention of his will is the same nature of God. Therefore this intention is the supreme good. No, Trismegistus, look, Asclepius, from the intention comes the will, and this in turn gives rise to abolition. He does not intensely want anything who possesses everything and wants what he has, who also wants all that is good and has how much he wants, because this is God and the cosmos of his image. And since it comes from someone good, it is also good. Good or the cosmos, Trismegistus? Good, Asclepius, now I explain it to you. Just as God dispenses and distributes among all types and genres of the cosmos everything good, namely thought, soul, and life, in the same way the cosmos distributes and provides all these things that seem good to mortals. This is the alternation of the seasons, the germination, the development and ripening of fruits, and similar things. Intelligible and sensible gods are everywhere, observing all things around them while dwelling on the sensitive apex of the highest heaven. For there is a place beyond heaven, a place without stars and alien to all corporeal things, that governs our lives, which we call Jupiter. He occupies his place between earth and heaven. On the other hand, Jupiter Plutonian is the lord of earth and sea, and nourishes mortal living beings that produce fruits thanks to the energy of these gods. The fruits, the trees, and the earth are vivified by them, and there are still other gods whose energies and effects are distributed among all that exists. Prophecy will come on the day when the gods who exercise dominion over the earth will abandon their places. They will establish themselves in a city located at the farthest boundary of Egypt, towards the setting sun, and towards it will head all mortal kind by land and sea. At that time, where will these gods Trismegistus be settled? In a great city on the Libyan mountain. But now, with this theme of death and immortality, judgment of souls follows, and it is necessary that we speak about the immortal and the mortal. Because for many men ignorant of the truth, the anticipation and fear of death torment them. Death occurs with the dissolution of the body, exhausted by labor, once the number upon which all its members are adjusted, like a useful instrument for life, is fulfilled. Therefore, the body dies when it can no longer support the vital activities of man. And death is nothing but the dissolution of the body and the disappearance of bodily sensibility. Therefore, it is useless to worry about it. But there is another cause for concern, unnecessary indeed, which men despise due to ignorance or disbelief. What is it that men ignore or do not believe? Trismegistus. Listen, Asclepius. Once the soul has separated from the body, it must undergo judgment and examination of its merit under the authority of the supreme demon. If, after careful consideration, it finds a pious and just soul, then it allows it to remain in the places that correspond to it. But if it finds it dirty with faults and stained with vices, it casts it down from above to below, delivering it to storms and whirlwinds in a place where discord often occurs between air, fire, and water. This is so that between heaven and earth it is forever shaken and tossed to and fro by the turbulences of matter. And this is its eternal punishment, and therein its own immortality harms it, as it is subjected by an immortal sentence to endless torment. Realize that it is the power of seeing ourselves implicated in something like this that should truly frighten us, that should distress us, and that should put us on guard. Because unbelievers, after their crimes, will be forced to believe, not with words but with deeds, not with threats, but with the very suffering of punishments. But Trismegistus, it is not human law that punishes men's crimes. Firstly, everything earthly is mortal, and therefore those who live and die due to the body's cause are also mortal. On the other hand, men are subject to punishments according to the merits and faults of this life, but after death they will also be subjected to penalties even more severe, depending on how hidden the faults of their life remained while they lived. Because as divinity foreknows all things, punishments are adjudicated in just retribution for crimes. Who are the ones condemned to the greatest punishments, Trismegistus? Those who are condemned to violent death by human laws, because their death does not appear as payment of their debt to nature, but as retribution for their crimes. On the contrary, the just man has his refuge in the worship of God and the highest piety. For God protects these men from all evil. Indeed, the Father and Lord of all things, who is all in all, manifests to everyone by his own will. But not in one place, nor as something, nor with a certain magnitude. Instead, he illuminates man with the self-knowledge of the mind, and when the darkness of error is dispelled from his soul, and the clarity of truth is acquired, man unites with all his thought in divine knowledge. Through this love, he is liberated from the part of his nature that makes him mortal, and gains confidence in future immortality. Such is the vast distance that separates the good man from the wicked, because the righteous man, illuminated by piety, religion, prudence, worship, and reverence to God, knows almost with his own eyes the true reasons for things. And by the certainty his belief gives him, he becomes as superior to all other men, as the sun itself is to all other stars by its light. For the sun illuminates the other stars, not so much by the power of its light, but by its divinity and sanctity. Indeed, Asclepius, you must believe in the sun as the second God, the one who governs and illuminates all living beings, terrestrial, animated, and inanimate alike. Then nothing mortal can be in it. In fact, if each of its parts subsists forever, identical to itself within the bosom of this cosmos, always one that lives and lives eternally, then mortality in any way does not fit into it. Therefore, if it is necessary for it to live forever, it must be completely filled with life and eternity. If the cosmos is eternal, then the sun itself is eternal, the governor of the sources of life and of all liveliness to which it attends and provides diligently. God governs eternally living beings and vivifies them before they exist in the world, and eternally provides life itself. But this provision was made once and for all. It provided life to all vital things by an eternal law, in the manner I will explain to you. The cosmos moves in the very life of eternity, and its place is located in this living eternity. Therefore, it cannot remain motionless nor be destroyed, as it is enveloped and almost constrained by this living eternity. In turn, the cosmos provides life to all beings inhabiting it, and is the abode of all beings governed under the sun. The movement of the cosmos is the result of a double activity. On the one hand, it is vivified from the outside by eternity. On the other hand, it vivifies in turn everything within it, diversifying all things according to numbers and times established by the action of the sun and the movement of the stars in regulated periods of time instituted by divine law. Terrestrial time is discerned by the quality of the air through the alternation of warm and cold periods, celestial time by the return of the stars to their proper places during their periodic revolution. The cosmos is the receptacle of time, and time sustains life with its course and movement. The course of time is regulated according to a strict order, and in this ordered passage, time produces the renewal of the alternation of all things within the cosmos. As all things are subject to these processes, there is nothing stable, nothing fixed, nor immobile among celestial or terrestrial things, but only God, and rightly so, because only God is in himself and by himself centered entirely on himself, full and perfect. He is his firm stability, for what external impulse can move him from his place if all things are in him and he alone is in all things? Unless we dare to think that his movement occurs in eternity, but not even that, because eternity also remains motionless, as everything returns to it, and in it begins the movement of all times. God has always remained at rest, and eternity, like him, remains immobile eternally, containing within itself even before this cosmos that we rightly call sensible, a cosmos made in the image of God, insofar as it imitates eternity. Therefore, although time is always in motion, it possesses a faculty of stability that resides in its need to return to itself. Something similar but reverse happens with eternity. It is stable and mobile, fixed, and yet the course of time, which is mobile, is always restored in eternity through a regulated cyclical movement of them. It follows that immovable eternity, undoubtedly in itself, seems to move because of time, in which it itself is given, and in which all movement occurs, so that paradoxically, from the immobility of eternity, movement results, and from the mobility of time, stability. It passes according to a stable law in this strict sense. It can be thought that God moves in himself while remaining immobile. In fact, the movement of his stability results immobile because of his infinity, for the law of the infinite presupposes immobility. Under these conditions, this God, imperceptible to the senses, is indeterminate, ungraspable, and incomparable, so that we cannot discover, reach, and retain him. Where, how, or who he is. Everything about him remains uncertain to us. He moves in the most absolute stability, and his stability in him, whether it be God or eternity or both or one or the other, or each of the two in one and the other. Therefore eternity lacks the limits of time, and in turn, time is eternal, although it can be delimited either by number, by alternation, or by return. Otherwise, by virtue of the revolution of the stars, both time and eternity manifest themselves as infinite, as eternal. But as stability, eternity is fixed, so that it can contain within itself everything that moves and rightly obtains hegemony by virtue of this firmness. Therefore, the first principles of all that exists are God and eternity. On the other hand, the cosmos does not enjoy this privilege as it is movable, where mobility predominates over stability, although it possesses as the law of its eternal movement an immovable firmness. Excursus. The hierarchy of Nu, the levels of knowledge, thought is similar in everything to divinity, and remains therefore immobile in itself while moving in its stability. It is holy, incorruptible, eternal, and any other attribute that more dignifiedly designates the eternity of the supreme God, which subsists in the truth of itself, and is completely filled with all the non-sensible forms and the ordering of the whole, and thus subsists with God. The thought of the cosmos is the receptacle of all sensible forms and orders. Human thought, finally, depends on the capacity of its own memory, which allows man to remember how many things he has accomplished up to this point. Man descends in his divinity of thought, for the supreme God did not allow divine thought to mingle with all living beings, lest he be ashamed of his union with inferior beings. The knowledge corresponding to human thought, its character and extension, depends exclusively on the memory of the past, because it is by virtue of this retentive capacity that man has been able to establish himself as ruler of the earth. The knowledge of the nature and character of the thought of the cosmos results from the observation of all things in the cosmos. The thought of eternity is second in rank. It shows itself, and its character is discerned in the sensible cosmos. But the only truth is the knowledge of the character, and the character itself, of the thought of the Supreme God. However, of this truth, we cannot discern any trace, not even a sketch, in this sensible cosmos. Because there, where things are discerned under the dimension of time, there are nothing but lies. Where things are born in time, error appears. Consider Asclepius, of what things we dare to speak, and what things we pretend to achieve, even while we are established in these places. Therefore, I give thanks to you, Supreme God, because you have illuminated me with the light of your vision. As for you, Asclepius, keep the love stored in the innermost recesses of your hearts for these divine mysteries, covered, and keep them secret. However, intelligence differs from thought in the following. Our intelligence can only reach and engage in mental effort, the kind of apprehension and discernment that corresponds to the character of the thought of the cosmos. On the other hand, intelligence of chaos can access knowledge of eternity and the gods who are above it. Therefore, to men, it is only given to see the things of heaven as through a dark veil, to the extent that the condition of our thought allows it, but our greatly restricted capacity becomes immensely expanded when it enjoys inner vision. The cosmos, fullness and complexion, non-existence of emptiness. As for emptiness, to which most people give so much importance, I think that it neither exists nor has it been able to exist, nor will it ever exist in any way, for all parts of the cosmos are perfectly filled, just as the cosmos itself is perfectly full and replete with bodies that differ in quality and form, which have their own figures and magnitudes. There are some larger and others smaller with different degrees of density and subtlety. The denser and larger ones are easily perceptible, while the smaller and more subtle ones are difficult to see or not seen at all, and we only perceive them by touch. This is what leads many to believe that there are no bodies but rather empty spaces. This is entirely impossible, as just as the space outside the cosmos, if such a thing exists, and I do not believe it does, must be filled with intelligible beings suitable to its divine nature. Similarly, the so-called sensible cosmos must be perfectly filled with bodies and living beings corresponding to its nature and quality. However, we do not perceive these sensible beings in their actual appearance. Some we see as excessively large, beyond measure, while others as too small. This illusion arises either from the length of the intervening space or from the weakness of our vision. There are other bodies, finally, which due to their reduced dimensions are considered non-existent by the majority. I refer to the demons who are among us, I believe, and to the heroes who dwell among the purest part of what is above us, that place not covered by mist or clouds, nor disturbed by the activity of any star. Therefore, Asclepius, do not say of anything that it is empty unless you specify what it is empty of fire, of water, or of something similar. For although it may be the case that something lacks things of that nature, it is impossible for something that seems empty, no matter how small or large it may be, to be devoid of breath and air. The same can be said of place, a term that is meaningless if considered in isolation. For place is always the place of something, whatever it may be, and if we deprive it of its principle, we mutilate the meaning of the word. Therefore, we should say in place of water, in place of fire, or tin, or similar things. For just as it is impossible for there to be something empty of something, it is inconceivable for a place to exist without something. However, if you imagine a place without that of which it is the place, it will give you the impression that it is an empty place. But I do not believe such a thing can exist in the cosmos, because emptiness is nothingness, and even regarding place itself, it cannot appear unless you add to it. As to human bodies, the three dimensions, length, width, and height, intelligible cosmos and sensible cosmos, keeping these considerations in mind, Asclepius and other listeners know that the intelligible cosmos, which can only be discerned with the eye of the mind, is incorporeal, and nothing corporeal can intrude into its nature. That is, nothing that can be distinguished by quality, quantity, and number, for in it, nothing of such characteristics exists. On the other hand, this so-called sensible cosmos is the receptacle of all sensible forms or qualities of bodies, and this whole collection cannot be animated without the assistance of God. For God is all, everything proceeds from him, everything depends on his will, and he is all good, beautiful, wise, and incomparable, perceptible, and intelligible only to himself, a God without whom nothing was, is, or will be. Everything is from him and through him, the diverse and multiform qualities, the immense and measurable quantities and all types of forms. You should give thanks to him, Asclepius, if you manage to understand all this, and if you carefully consider this whole, you will realize how both the sensible cosmos and how much it contains within it are covered, as by a garment, by that superior cosmos, archetype, sensible form, and individual in each kind of living being, whether mortal or immortal, rational or irrational, animated or inanimate. Every individual, by virtue of its belonging to him, acquires the appearance of its kind. Therefore, every living being possesses in its entirety the form of its kind. However, within the strict limits of this form, individuals differ from each other. For example, the human kind is uniform, for we can distinguish it from other kinds of living beings by appearance alone. However, within this form of its own, individuals differ from each other. In fact, the ideal type is divine and incorporeal, or like anything that can be learned with the mind. But the individual forms, composed of two elements, one by another incorporeal or not, cannot be born identical to each other in distant points of space and time. For they change as many times as there are moments in the period of the revolution of the celestial circle in which resides the god named Morpho. Thus, the archetype remains unaltered in itself, while it produces as many copies as diverse as the moments in the world's revolution that change in the course of its passage, the ideal type that changes my orbit. Therefore, the form of each kind is permanent, even when there are individual differences in that form. Multiplicity and change, Trismegistus also changes in appearance, the cosmos. You understand, Clynthes, I explain things as if I were speaking to a sleeping person. What is the cosmos made of, but all born beings? You ask me then about the sky, the earth, and the elements. In that case, is there anything that changes appearance more frequently than these things? Look at the sky, which is sometimes wet and other times dry, which cools and heats up, which clears or clouds over. Do you want more different appearances for the same form? Look at the earth, constantly showing us different appearances when it holds seeds in its womb, when it nourishes sprouts, when it assigns its products varied and different qualities, and when it stops or continues its development, and especially when it administers qualities, scents, flavors, and forms to different trees, flowers, and fruits. Consider finally how many divine mutations fire undergoes, and how the sun and the moon adopt all forms, for in this they are somewhat similar to our mirrors, as they reflect copies similar to ideal forms with a rival splendor. But we have already sufficiently dealt with this topic of earthly gods, their creation, and faculties. Let us now return to the subject of man and divine reason, the gift that qualifies him as a rational animal. Everything we have said so far about man, worthy of admiration though it may be, is inferior to another of his faculties. For among all the marvels in man, what undoubtedly produces astonishment is his ability to discover the nature of the gods to produce it, a merit that belongs to our ancestors. For although initially they were completely mistaken about the doctrine of the gods and did not believe in them, they paid attention to piety towards God. Later they invented the art of making gods. When they managed to find the suitable substance, they added a virtue of material nature. But since they lacked the capacity to shape souls, they evoked those of demons and angels, and introduced them into images through holy and divine rites, so that the idols had the power to do good and evil. Asclepius, your own grandfather, is an example of this. He was the first inventor of medicine, and there is a temple dedicated to him on the Libyan mountain near the banks of the crocodiles, where the material man lies, that is, the body, since the rest, or rather, everything, if the whole man consists of the consciousness of life, returned to heaven, and still today provides his help with his divine power to sick men, just as he did in life with the art of medicine. Or the case of the one whose name I am honored to carry, Hermes, my grandfather, who resides in his hometown now named after him. Does he not help and safeguard all mortals who come to him from everywhere? The same can be said of Isis, wife of Osiris. We know the great amount of benefits she dispenses when she is favorable, and how many men she harms when she is irritated. Because earthly and material gods, having been made and composed of both natures by humans, easily become angered. Therefore the Egyptians solemnly declare these animals sacred, and venerate in each city the souls of those animals whose souls have been deified while alive, to the extent that they live under their laws and are named after them. However, the revered and venerated animals in one city are not so in another, and this is the cleanest cause of the constant wars among Egyptian cities. Trismegistus, what kind of virtue do these so-called earthly gods have? Look, Asclepius, this virtue is based partly on a combination of herbs, stones, and aromatic plants that inherently possess divine properties. Moreover, these gods are delighted with frequent sacrifices, hymns, praises, and concerts of sweetest sound in the tone of celestial harmony, so that through the repetition of divine acts, the celestial element in the idol may happily endure its stay among men for a long time. This is how man becomes the craftsman of gods. But do not think that the activities of these earthly gods are capricious, for if the celestial gods who dwell in the highest heavens complete and oversee each part of the order assigned to them, our earthly gods in turn watch over things one by one, predict the future through lots or divination, and in anticipation of what is to come to the aid of men, whom they assist by virtue of a loving relationship, destiny, necessity, and order. Therefore, Trismegistus, if the celestial gods govern universal matters and the terrestrial gods watch over particular matters, what part of cosmic governance belongs to destiny, that which we call destiny, Asclepius, is the necessity that all interconnected events must be fulfilled, like links in a chain. Thus, destiny is the executor of all things, whether it is the supreme God himself, or a second God produced by him, or the very organization of all celestial and terrestrial things, firmly established by divine laws. Therefore, destiny and necessity are inseparably linked together. Destiny engenders the beginnings of all things, and then necessity forces their fulfillment. The result of this dual activity is order, which is the chaining together of all events and their arrangement in temporal succession. Nothing escapes this structure of order, an organization that is realized in all things. For the cosmos itself moves according to order and achieves its global cohesion thanks to order. Therefore, destiny, necessity, and order are the three greatest creations of the will of God, who governs the cosmos through his law and according to his divine plan. For these three, by divine will, all desire or lack thereof is completely alien. For they are not moved by anger, nor are they influenced by acts of thanks, but they obey the necessity of the eternal plan, which is nothing other than inevitable, immutable, and inflexible eternity. Firstly, destiny, which like a seed sets the foundation for the generation of all future events. Secondly, necessity forces all things to their actualization. And thirdly, order produces the chaining together of everything arranged by destiny and necessity. This is precisely eternity, which has no beginning or end, and whose passage is determined by an immutable law describing an everlasting cyclical movement, in which birth and death alternate ceaselessly through its elements. Thus, with temporal changes, those same elements are born again in which they had previously died. This is the essence of the cyclical process, the reason for circularity, where all things are linked so that the beginning of rotation cannot be distinguished from its end. If there is existence, it seems to always precede itself and follow. Nevertheless, this does not prevent chance and randomness from continuing within all material things. In conclusion and final prayer, I have explained everything point by point to the best of my human ability, as allowed and consented by divinity. Now, all that remains is to bless God with our prayers and return to the care of the body. For we have sufficiently saturated our souls, so to speak, with divine matters. They all departed from the sanctuary and began to direct their prayers to God, with their gaze turned towards the south. For when one prays to God at dusk, one must look towards the south, just as if it were dawn. One must look towards the east. But as they began to pray, Tad wrote, addressing him with a gentle voice, do you want us to turn to your father who accompanies our plea? Goodbye with incense and perfumes. But Trismegistus, who had heard him, angrily interrupted, Be silent, for it is almost sacrilege to burn incense and everything else while praying to God. For nothing should be lacking for those for whom everything is good. Everything is good. Therefore let us adore God, giving thanks, because the best way to incense God is the action of mortal thanks. Coptic prayer. We thank you with all our soul and all our heart stretched towards you, an imperturbable man, honored with the name of God and blessed with the appellation of Father. For towards you and towards him all things are diffused, the tenderness of the Father, his affection and respect for knowledge, everything that exists, sweet and simple, graced with thought and knowledge, thought so that we think of you, reason so that we become your interpreters, knowledge so that we know you. We rejoice to have been enlightened by your knowledge. We rejoice because you have informed us about yourself. We rejoice because in this body you have built us with your knowledge. Human thanksgiving that reaches you is the only thing that allows us to know you. We have known you, intelligible light, life of life. We have known you, matrix of every seed, matrix that conceives. It is by the nature of the Father that we have known eternal permanence of the Father, progenitor. In this way, we have venerated your goodness, and we raise no supplication. We only want to be safeguarded in your knowledge, and the only safeguard lies in what we want, not to stray from this kind of life. After this prayer, they embraced each other and went to eat their food, which was pure and bloodless. Prayer. And we thank you with all our soul and heart stretched towards you, an unspeakable name honored with the name of God and praised with that of Father. For you manifest maternal tenderness, affection, and the sweetest energy to all beings. Grace, the gift with which you endowed us with nous, logos, and hypnosis. Thought, so that we understand you. Reason, so that we invoke you. Knowledge, so that we recognize you. We rejoice to have been enlightened by your knowledge. We rejoice that you have shown yourself to us. We rejoice because even though we are in these bodies, you have divinized us with your knowledge. The human thanksgiving directed towards you is the only way to know you. We have known you, forgetful of human life that we have known, matrix of every nature. We have known you, zenith matrix hour of the creature of the Father that we have known, eternal permanence of the Father, progenitor, reverencing in this way your good. We ask you for nothing but the grace alone to allow us to persevere in your knowledge, the only safeguard so as not to stray from this kind of life. Latin prayer. Thanks we give you abundantly, and we, because only by your grace have we reached the light of your knowledge, holy name, and worthy of honor. Only name with which God should be blessed, with veneration worthy of a Father, because as a Father, you graciously grant to all beings your tenderness, your pity, your affection, and anything else sweeter that is effective for us, making us where thought, reason, and knowledge thought, so that we can understand you, reason so that we can discover you in the signs, knowledge so that by knowing you, we can rejoice. We rejoice that after being saved by your light, you have shown us all your being. We rejoice that you have designated us to consecrate ourselves for eternity, even enclosed in a body. Recognizing your majesty is the only way to thank you. We have known you, supreme light only perceptible by thought. We have known you, true life of the second life, matrix of all nature. We have known you, eternal permanence of a nature completely filled with your conception. In this entire prayer in which we adore the good of your goodness, we only ask you for this. Allow us to remain steadfast in the love of your knowledge and never stray from this kind of life. After this prayer, we had a pure dinner, unblemished with the flesh of living beings.